I'm Liz Klein. I'm Deputy Director of the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center at NYU School of Law. My chapter in the book, Looking Back to Move Forward, discusses the Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil spill, which took place in April of 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. As many know, that disaster resulted in the deaths of 11 people, injured really scores of others, and caused widespread environmental and economic devastation throughout the Gulf. While there were thousands of legal cases filed related to this event, the chapter in the book really focuses on the civil settlement ultimately reached among BP, the company most liable for the disaster, and the federal government, Gulf states, and local governments. Each of the crises discussed in this book can and really have filled thousands of pages of analysis. But when looking at some of the key takeaways from the Deepwater Horizon civil settlement, I'd note probably 4 important characteristics that help in comparing this settlement to others discussed in the book. First, this was a discrete event. It was time-bound. It was not like many of the other health and environmental crises discussed in the book that take place over decades. They're diffuse in their harms, and they might cause injury to generations of people. Second, the liable actors were known from the outset. BP and the other companies responsible for the crisis were known to the federal government, and that made it somewhat easier for the federal government and the Gulf states to quickly develop strong claims against BP and the other companies in a more timely fashion. Third, there was really intense media attention to this disaster for many months following the explosion. There was this 87-day drama of the uncapped oil spilling into the Gulf of Mexico, harming birds and wildlife, causing widespread economic and environmental devastation all throughout the Gulf. And that intense attention, I think, put pressure on the federal government and the Gulf states to move relatively quickly toward bringing claims against BP and the others responsible for the disaster. Finally, I would note that the judge in this civil litigation really undertook a very disciplined approach to how the litigation would unfold. He identified phases that the litigation should take place in, and I think that disciplined and determined approach helped to pressure the parties involved to get to a judicial settlement. That settlement, which I talk about in the book, includes billions of dollars under a piece of legislation known as the Restore Act to help invest in economic and environmental restoration efforts in the Gulf, and over $8 billion in natural resources damages. No doubt, in part because of the really intense media attention, Congress moved quickly to enact the Restore Act and ensure that the penalties that came in the civil settlement would be committed to Gulf restoration efforts as opposed to going to general treasury accounts. Unfortunately, once the cameras clicked off, congressional attention also really waned. And so there is no other piece of successful legislation that was pushed forward to enact the real fundamental oil and gas development reforms that folks think are needed to prevent another Deepwater Horizon disaster from happening. In short, the Deepwater Horizon really illustrates how difficult it can be to institute the kind of systemic reforms necessary to prevent the widespread public health and environmental damages that certain sectors of our economy and our society can inflict. Making the types of systemic changes needed really requires a whole-of-government approach, sustained leadership attention, and a real commitment to durable reform.